Hi everybody, this is Hero back with another Cataclysm Classic Blood DK video. I am checking out Heroic Dungeons. We have hit 85. I'm leveling up, and so I wanted to put out a video, as I had promised, to tell you a little bit about what changes for Blood DK as you get into Heroic Dungeons and raids. What are some of the considerations I'm thinking about? So this video is going to go over UI, gear, talents, glyphs, and there'll be a substantial gameplay portion in which I just commentate what's happening in front of me. And the purpose is to get you equipped. For those who don't know much about Blood DK, this is a chance for you to see it in action and to see if there's something you'd like to pick up. Let's begin by talking about UI, or the user interface. A few tips that I'd like to send your way as you start to think about more difficult content. The first one is keep everything central. I mean by that, keep the information that is relevant for gameplay in the center of your screen. You can see I have my runes, I have my health bar, key, CDs, and my party frames all in that one range in the center. Very important for runes and runic power especially, because you will have to adapt as a Blood DK to incoming rune charges and fluctuating runic power values throughout every encounter. And what I mean by this is sometimes you will get a charge back when you rune strike, and sometimes you will not. So knowing what's happening directly in front of you so you don't have to look away is very important. It's also significant for major CDs or your trinkets. You can see here I'm running a trinket that gives me a bunch of dodge. So I want to use that and have that in the center of my screen so that I know what's happening. Same true for rune tap. I do track blood shield. You don't need to, but for me it's just one of those steps up into heroic and raiding where I want to know, do I have that additional layer of defense? You can mark this in lots of different ways. This is just a simple weak aura. Or is my blood shield gone and I need to think about other defenses? Finally, party frames should also be somewhat central, meaning that you want to know, what's my party's health at? Are we in a bad situation? And typically I want to have a darkened view of that unless people are hurt, and then it does a gradient down to dark red or bright red so that I know I need to lean on my healer. When I think about gear for Blood DK, one thing comes to mind: mastery. Stacking mastery is one of the most effective ways to play Blood DK in Cataclysm because it gives us a gigantic shield. So right now I think in my gear I'm at something like 102 or 3% mastery. This is through Reforging, which I'll talk about in a second. But what you're looking for is drops that have natural mastery on them, like Raz's Pauldrons or Beauty's Plate as examples. There are better examples in some respects that don't have parry, for example, that might have something else like hit on it. But more or less the main thing after eye level or stamina is having mastery. We get Reforging in Cataclysm, so you can take your piece like I have here, the breastplate of the witness. You can take off some undesirable trait and put on mastery, and I encourage you to do that. Once you start heading into heroics, that's one other piece of your gameplay you will want to change up, making sure that you're stacking as much of it as you possibly can as you get gear. Talents change up a little bit in my mind as well. What you're looking to do is shed some of the leveling talents. You can get rid of Blood Caked, which also doesn't do very much. And instead you're going to pick up some Unholy and some Frost instead. So Epidemic is going to increase the duration. This means it lasts basically as long as Outbreak. And Runic Power means we can store a bit more before we hit our death strikes. It also incidentally increases our death strike damage when we're full. There are other options if you need some AoE. I just put them on there. More death and decay damage, more disease damage. Prime glyphs for dungeons. I use death and decay for duration, but there are other options too, like Heart Strike, which is fine and your go-to for raid. For the major glyphs, I also use Blood Boil and Pestilence for ease of area effects. So Blood Boil and Pestilence reach further, which is a big deal with big pulls. And then the minor stuff doesn't really matter that much, but blood tap, so it doesn't kill you, I guess. The rest of the video, guys, about 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk to you about in-game decision making. Here's a few things that are on my mind Where am I looking on the screen? What do I do to continue to float a blood rune, and why is that important? And what are my CDs looking like? Those are the main pieces that enter into the gameplay, so I'll just kind of commentate as we go through. This boss does only magic damage because of lightning bolt cast. You can see the little blood shield marker. I have that just below my trinket. It basically does not go off unless it actually drops off because I'm not casting death strikes, because he's not hitting me for physical damage. So that is something to consider when you're taking all of this damage. You want to save your AMS for this moment because it's heavy damage, or cycle your CDs for the outside, but just be aware that you're going to get hit a little bit harder because you don't have physical damage being absorbed by that shield. This boss here has a couple of mechanics that are important. The main one being where he charges to an area and smashes into it. That'll one-shot people, but also the adds. Just be aware that sometimes your teammates, there's the smash, sometimes your teammates will not pick up these adds with their own mechanical guy properly, and you might have to tank it for a little bit. But beyond that, there's an enrage that you have to be mindful of. You can basically move your fort and your vamp back and forth, since they're you have good cooldowns there. You can vamp and then fort and then vamp again for this boss, that sort of thing. Just tracking your runes here is really important, and floating that blood rune is the most significant piece. On pulls like this one, I'm using my dodge trinket because of all the little guys, and these big guys kind of hit pretty hard, but you could use any number of CDs. I could have used empowered rune weapon. I could have used AMS on the opener to avoid some of the magic damage at the beginning. I could have used my sack, so sacrificial pact to kill my ghoul. All of those would have been useful. This boss in heroic has an expanding area of bad from the dark fissure. You can see it there growing from the first one. And so what you're looking to do here is just make sure you have enough room, especially for your melee DPS. Remember, in Cataclysm, being behind a target still was relevant because hit and expertise are in the game, and some classes that really want their white hits to land, like rogues and warriors especially, get a bonus more or less from being behind, because it can't be parried from behind or dodged, one of them. The point is, putting the boss in a bad spot on that fight will lower your team's damage, and this carries forward into a lot of raiding scenarios as well as a Blood DK. Finding good positioning for your team to succeed is really what you want. I'll talk for a minute as we watch some of the RP here for this boss in the revamped Dead Mines about the significance of floating this blood rune. So because of the way Rune Strike interacts with our kit, giving us back runes, 40% chance every time you rune strike, you are looking to maximize the value of those returns. And if you have a rune that is waiting to be used, doesn't matter if it's blood, unholy, or frost, pressing rune strike will bring back another rune. So if all of your frosts are empty, when you rune strike, it will bring back a frost rune if you have a blood one and an unholy one already ready to go. So the goal of the gameplay becomes, which runes do I really want to get back? And it turns out, just in terms of efficiency, that leaving your one blood rune floating or staying there unused tends to give you the most bang for your buck, because you can convert your unholy and frost runes into death strikes, which then turn into death runes, so you can be more flexible later with them. But you cannot turn your second blood rune into a death strike. You can turn one of them in through blood tap, but it always picks that first one, you'll notice on the left. It will reset it. It will override the blood rune that's there. It will leave the one blood rune in the second slot and convert the first one into a death rune every single time. So it's that nuance of the gameplay that makes it so floating the one blood rune ends up being a really big throughput choice for you, not just in terms of healing and survivability, but actually in terms of damage as well, because you get more death strikes back. Your rune strikes are bringing back the appropriate runes so you can death strike more. It keeps your economy of runes and runic power a lot smoother, even if you have very little haste. So that's my encouragement to you. Obviously, it's also a kind of get out of jail free or an insurance card, so you can immediately use it to rune tap. You can use it to generate a little more RP if you need RP for something. You can spread pestilence if you need to spread it on new targets. You can do a number of things with that one blood rune. But the point that I want to bring up is in terms of the economy, if you get into the habit of floating that one blood rune, you'll find the game smooths out a lot more for you as a Blood DK. Blood DK is a ton of fun because it pumps like crazy amounts of damage. And here's without really sacrificing survivability, because as you take damage, your death strike and obviously the blood shield that you healed from will carry you. So you scale with difficulty, more or less. Your defensive side does. So that means that, yes, you have to play it right. You have to death strike at the right time and manage your runes properly. But if you're doing that well, you are just unstoppable. It's really fun. You can manage these 1 minute CDs, especially your shield, anti-magic shell, and your vampiric blood. Cycling these on 1 minute is really, really efficient. It's very hard to kill a Blood DK because of this. And you can pump out, look, I'm doing something like 20k, 25k damage in 330, 340 gear while healing for, well, whatever is enough, 4, 5, 6, 10k HPS. Really solid. You can do big pulls like this. So here I'm looking at the dragon. I want to get these guys in, spread my diseases, and then get sat on that green healing orb. And my team blasts, I think these survival hunters kind of blow it up. But the point is, you have the tools to manage coming into a fight. You can pop Fortitude on the way in, or you can put on Vamp Blood on the way in, or you can have your Pact ready as you're tossing Death and Decay down. All of these things are available to you. Even in tough pulls, like we triple pull these guys, and they kind of enrage and start smacking you. You can see here you start to take a lot of damage. So I roll Fort at the beginning, and then we're just holding CDs. So I'm holding my Pact here. You can see in the bottom left beside Anti-Magic Shell. That's the next one I'm thinking about. And then after that, I'm thinking about my Rune Tap. So we Pact into Rune Tap. That's fine. Now I'm just thinking, okay, I need to get back runes. And what would be really bad right now is if I was getting back blood runes because I can't use them to death strike and heal. So making sure in that sequence that I floated that blood rune was very important because I had used up my external CDs. Same thing kind of here, right? We don't want to use up that final blood rune because we want to be able to death strike and rune strike to get back efficient things. One thing I should note here, it gets a little difficult because we don't kick both greater heals, which in heroic actually top the mobs fairly reasonably. So just be aware, if you can get your group to kick, you might want to tell them to do it. Sometimes people CC one of those mobs. If you can't, you can do the double kick with your Mind Freeze as well as your Strangulate, I think it's called, and grab them both, but you have to be pretty fast because in Cataclysm those casts are really, really fast casts. So through all of this, when I think about CDs and what I'm holding and what I'm using, out of the gate I tend to use Anti-Magic Shell or Vampiric Blood, basically interchangeably at the beginning of a pull. So I'm starting thinking, what kinds of mobs am I dealing with? Is it largely casters that are going to hit me as I'm doing my first 3 GCDs to get things going? Those being Death and Decay, Outbreak, and Pestilence. So as those are going off, I'm going to get clapped by something. What do I need? And if it's mostly physical stuff, I want Vamp Blood because I can't Death Strike in those first few CDs. If it's mostly casters, then we toss on the Shell. Here's an example where the pull is going to be huge damage, like AoE magic damage. And you can see my whole team just gets destroyed by this. But why did we live? Well, because we timed our anti-magic shell properly. So that's kind of what makes Death Knight, in my mind, such an interesting class, is you have control over all the pieces. I just wanted to show you an example of where my character is at. We are at 342. We have got the following sorts of things. We're looking at getting this. We have Stam Gem. Sorry, I was blanking on the name of it, but I'll just show you. So the Austere Shadow Spirit Diamond is what we're looking for. There's a debate in my mind about whether you want Stone Skin Gargoyle or Fallen Crusader. Stone Skin obviously still gives you, because you're getting armor, and through a talent, we're still getting some attack power because it's giving us 4% increased armor. And through talents, we're getting bladed armor giving us attack power. So that's actually still pretty decent versus the burst of strength that you might get from Fallen Crusader. But what I'm really thinking about here when I'm looking at gear pickups, this is true for stuff you purchase. So Helm of Easeful Death and I believe the Beach Green Belt are purchases that I made. And the reason I purchased these is because we get a lot of mastery out of them. So you can put a yellow gem and get full mastery fractured. This will get upgraded obviously once we get a bunch of stuff for it. But the mastery here on Red Sky Pendant as a drop, for example, is really quite good. And then we would prefer, there's one of the weapons that has mastery. I forget which one in the dungeons. It might be, well, I'll find it some other time. But you can see here, mostly we're just reforging to get mastery. Nothing wrong with dodge and parry stats. What these largely mean is that other classes like Ret Paladins and other DKs or warriors will not roll on them in dungeons because they don't want the dodge and parry, or they will feel obligated to give it to you. And look, at this point we're just getting gear, so reforge over to mastery, see if you can even out your parry and dodge chance, because you want them to be more or less the same, since they do more or less the same work. Parry used to be a little bit different, but now it basically functions as if you were not struck by the mob. So if you're off in terms of your parry and dodge percentage, they work against one another. So the closer they are to the same percentage, the more effective each of them are. So if you can get that, that's great. What else do I want to say? Yeah, but just look for mastery pieces if you can get them. When you think about long term, let me just go over to the to where we're going to grab Valor. If you're spending it, one of the things that's nice about tanking at this stage is you get a ton of justice points. So I've already purchased 2 items, capped out my justice points, and I've capped out my Valor for the week, but you can keep capping your justice. So you can basically grind and get 346 items. And then for Valor, we're looking to obviously pick up some of our set piece things. These are a great starting point for us because of the benefit from, oh, not this one, sorry. The one that gives us, where's the Blood DK one? I think there's a Blood DK one in here. Yeah, this one here. So here we're looking to get your magma plated leg guards for death strike damage. It's small, but it's still okay. We'll take it. It's one of our most damaging abilities. And the fort is obviously nice, going a lot longer. But until we get to that point, what we're really looking to do is find pieces, especially pieces like Band of Bees, where we're getting mastery out of it. I think there's another one, this one too, Ring of Battle Anthem. So these are all unique equipped, but they both serve our purposes since they have mastery at 359. Pretty useful. You can't purchase weapons here, so it's kind of a waste. I think a cloak is another reasonable one here. I think floating web is what we want since we get mastery of it. But you see my point is finding the gear that's going to give us the most mastery is really what we are after. You don't have to get things like rock furrow boots. You know, yes, it's stamina, yes, it's dodge and expertise, but really there's no mastery on that, so it's not as good. Yeah, that's just a sense of kind of where gearing should go for you. Hit chance, we really want it to be around 8% here. Obviously, you can see if I was fighting a raid boss, 2.51% of my attacks would miss. It's not the biggest deal for us as Blood, but our damage will go down as a result. But yeah, that's a look at heroics, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know how your journey's been going so far. I think the raid's open on the 30th, I believe, so that'll be a lot of fun. And until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.